Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well this morning. My name is Mrs. Edwards. I'm the career counselor at Atlee High School, and welcome to our second day of HCPS Virtual College Boot Camp. We are so happy you're here, and I have the great pleasure this morning of introducing Ms. Kate Huck, an admissions counselor with Randolph-Macon College. Kate, thank you so much for being with us here this morning. And thanks for being here. And today, Kate is going to talk about the college admissions essay. And so, Kate, with that, I'm going to just hand it right over to you to get us started this morning.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning and continue helping out with this process. The essay is probably one of my favorite parts of the application. So really looking forward to sharing more about that. Just a little bit about me. I am one of the admissions counselors here, as Ms. Edward has already shared, one of the admissions counselors who has recently started in January. So I started in January with Randolph-Macon, but I've been in higher ed admission for the last 4 years. So it's something I'm very passionate about, and I love being able to help students and families figure out what part of the process they need a little extra help on. So really looking forward to sharing some more information with you all today. We can go ahead and get started onto our next slide. So talking a little bit more about the purpose of the essay, and it's something that is really important to the overall application. The way that we like to evaluate here at Randolph-Macon. And one thing I'll say is that this is going to be really helpful advice, generally speaking, just to get you started and brainstorming. One thing that I really would like to share is that this is going to be really specific to us at Randolph-Macon, but don't be afraid to reach out to the admissions counselors or the admissions staff of the schools that you're interested in and excited about. We are all here across the board to help you answer questions and get familiar with this process. So even if you are excited about multiple schools, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you'd like to learn more about their process and how they review, I would encourage you to go on the college tours and learn more about their review process, because it's something that is really going to help you along the way. So that is my one caveat as we get started here. What you're going to hear throughout this presentation might start to sound repetitive, and I hope that that is true, because there are some really big takeaways that I really hope that you remember as you leave this presentation here today. So if we could just pull up the next couple of points, we'll go ahead and jump into that. So the purpose of the essay, it is one piece to the overall puzzle of your application, is the way that I like to describe it. So the essay is actually a really big part too, especially in the way that we evaluate for scholarship and general admission here, specifically at Randolph-Macon. The essay is kind of a two-prong part of the application. So evaluating your writing skills, which is hopefully the biggest takeaway that you have here today, and then learning more about you, the student and the person. So there's a couple of things that we'll look at as we go throughout the application, and I'll be sure to share some examples and give you some ideas on maybe how you can get started. But the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this today is that we are evaluating your writing skills. And this is the most important piece. As you get ready to head off into college and start that next part of your career preparation and your education journey, strong writing skills, no matter where you attend, is going to be a huge part. Specifically for us here at Randolph-Macon, our faculty members are going to hold our students to a high standard in communicating. So whether that's written or through speaking, through public speaking, even if it's just writing emails or being able to communicate with your other faculty and staff members, communication skills are really, really important, no matter the major, whether you're a STEM major, whether you are actively working through the arts. It's going to be really important for you to have those strong communication skills, especially if you are attending a liberal arts school like Randolph-Macon. It's going to be the building blocks of your entire curriculum. So it's really, really important. So what we're going to be looking at first, and most importantly, is evaluating your writing skills to make sure that you can take your high school level writing to a college level, and that you can translate that across all the things that you do on campus. So evaluating your writing skills is the most important part. The second thing that we really like to look at when we are looking at the essay is just learning more about you. So this is something that I'm sure we'll have questions on as we dive into choosing a topic and choosing prompts that are going to best reflect you. But one thing I will say is that the essay is a really great way to give us some more context to who you are. As we've already said, as a student, as a person, especially if you haven't been to campus or joined us for an event, this gives us a lot more context to who you are if we haven't met you before. So it is a really great way for us to get some more information about you. So we'll talk a little bit more about choosing a prompt that reflects you in the best light in just a couple of minutes. But just as an overall takeaway for how we evaluate the essay, it is going to be mostly looking at your writing skills, but it's a big part of how we review our students for their general admission and for any scholarships. So that's really something to keep in mind as you go throughout this process, is have it in the back of your mind that, you know, it's not going to be the only thing that gets looked at on your application. Of course, we are going to be looking at your academic record and the things you've done outside of the classroom as well. But keep in mind that the essay is not something just to say, put a check mark on. It's definitely something that can really, really help you as you move throughout this process. So we can head on over to the next slide and talk a little bit more about choosing a topic and what that looks like. So what we've already shared is that we know our writing skills are going to be very, very important. And we will definitely talk about that a little bit more as we move throughout this presentation. But your writing skills are going to be the most important part, but choosing a topic can also be something that is really beneficial to you. And it's good to be thinking about it early so that you're not overwhelmed with all the different topics that you could choose from moving forward. So it's good to be thinking about it early on, and we'll talk about some strategies on how to do that as well. But as far as choosing a topic, as I always tell my students whenever they come and visit campus, think of the application as an overall portfolio to you, the student, and the person. So it's not just a resume, or it's not just filling in the blanks. This is really everything about who you are as you've moved throughout high school in your life. So we want to get to know you on that level as well. That's why I really like the holistic review process that we have at Randolph-Macon, is because we are taking a look at every single part of what you've shared with us. So it's, we know, of course, we're going to look at you as a student first, but getting to know you on a deeper level is something that we really appreciate here. So I would say that choosing a topic can definitely be a little overwhelming at first, but once you really start to narrow in on some of those things, it can really, really help you. So thinking about it early is great. So coming to presentations like this and, you know, spending your summer thinking about the application is something that's going to be really helpful. The Common App is actually open today. So those applications are opening up now. So it's a very exciting time for you all, especially seniors. So moving forward with choosing a topic, you can see what we've got listed here are a couple of ideas, a couple of things to remember as you're choosing your topic. So one thing that's really great is when you're choosing a topic, it's important to be honest and to be yourself. That's probably the most basic advice, but it still stands true to just be honest and true to who you are, what your experiences have been. You don't have to be anybody else for the essay. You don't have to create stories that aren't authentic to you just so that it sounds more interesting. That's not what we're looking for. We really actually want to get to know you so that by the time that you've gone through and written this essay, we can connect you with other resources on campus potentially. If that's something that, you know, you move through and you're admitted, that's something that we can connect you with just by getting to know you through your essay. And we want to know what you're passionate about and excited about. And when you write about those things authentically, it comes across really strongly in your essays as well. So of course, being yourself. The next thing is I always tell my students, please brag, whether it is an interview, your essay, this is your time to showcase yourself. So don't be modest. Don't apologize for talking highly of yourself or your skills or what you've learned. All of those things are great. This is really, if there's ever a time to brag about yourself, now is the time. So do not be modest by any means. We want to celebrate you, celebrate your victories, celebrate the things that you maybe overcame, any of those things. Don't be modest. So anytime that you can talk highly of yourself in the essay is a good thing to us. Absolutely. The next thing is the answering the prompt. So of course, this is something that we'll talk about as we go through the writing process, but answering the prompt is something that is super important. And I hope that you walk away not only knowing that your writing skills are going to be evaluated, but your ability to answer the prompt and answer the question at hand and do it in a concise way is also going to be super important. So you have to be able to do that whenever you get into the college level. It's going to be more about getting the answer in and getting it done succinctly and correctly. So making sure that you are answering the prompt to the fullest is going to be really, really important. So one thing I will say, and we'll talk about a little bit more, I know we get a lot of questions on word count, and I will definitely answer any questions that we have at the end. I know we're planning on leaving some time for that, but overall, answering the prompt, just making sure that you don't have to meet the word count exactly, but that you are answering the question at hand. You're breaking it down into paragraphs. That's something that's really helpful for us and helpful for you. So when you do your formatting, if you're a very visual person, think about it as at least 3 paragraphs, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So making sure that you are formatting it in a way where you know that you are actively answering the question, you're answering the prompt to the fullest by having that breakdown of beginning, middle, end. That's really, really important. And then be specific. So of course, if you're being authentic and being true to your stories, you can definitely do this pretty easily. You can be specific. I would encourage you to do so. As we've already said, don't be modest. So be specific about the things that you've overcome or that you've learned. We really want to get to know you on that level. So being specific is very helpful. I know a lot of people ask questions about fluff. I know that this, is something that people say like, well, how much is too much? If I'm trying to meet a word count, am I saying too much? Or, I would say that fluff is fine as long as it is on topic and it's not repetitive. So making sure that if you are being a little bit more descriptive or giving us a little bit more of a creative edge, fluff is absolutely fine. You are welcome to give us some more details in that way. But just make sure that it doesn't veer off into something that's not related, or that you're not repeating yourself in different ways throughout the essay. So I would say that is a really big part of choosing the topic and making sure that whatever you're choosing to speak about, you can do so in a way that answers the prompt, talks highly of yourself, and then you can give us some more details throughout. So that would be some good things to think about as you are choosing the prompt. So we will go ahead on to the next slide and talk a little bit more about the writing process, preparing to write. So some of this might be very familiar from your English classes. And if, it's something that you've done in previous classes, then definitely bring that into how you prepare your essay. They're all really great suggestions I'm sure that you've seen in any of your English classes. So preparing to write is really important, as we've already shared. By thinking about choosing a topic and thinking about what to write, you're already benefiting yourself just by giving yourself a framework, giving yourself the opportunity to change your mind, go back, have different ideas. So preparing to write is really important. So the first thing that we've got here, and the second thing, because a lot of this is again going to go back to that central idea, is answering the question and showcasing your writing skills and your ability to stay organized and write a good essay. So the first one is organizing your thoughts, as we've already shared, just developing ideas. This is a really great way if you feel like you are struggling, reach out to your English teachers, talk to them about how you can get a good outline going, reach out to your friends and family. It is okay to reach out to other people. Sometimes it's hard to see ourselves objectively, and sometimes it's easier if we go to a friend or someone in our community and say, how do you see my role in this community? What are some things that you've noticed about me or feel like are strengths? Sometimes it's really good to get an idea of some of those things from friends, from their perspective. So feel free to reach out to people to get that framework, to get your thoughts organized, to get some ideas. Bullet points are always super helpful. You can just go through a couple of things that you feel like you might want to talk about. And if you're going to do those bullet points, make sure it always circles back to, does this answer the question? Am I answering the question with these bullet points that I've got here? The next point is considering the purpose, the question, what you want to convey. One thing that I will add here is that it's important to keep in mind that these stories are going to be authentic to you. And it's okay to write about a topic that you think we've already heard before. I know that students get really concerned that this has to be something extremely unique or extremely difficult. And it doesn't have to be. It is okay to write about something that we've probably read before. That is okay, because at the end of the day, it's still going to be coming from you, your unique perspective, your unique experience. You're not going to be able to replicate that. So it's still going to be an original coming from you. So I always like to tell students, if it is important to you, then it matters to us. So that is something that is really good when you are preparing the writing process and what you want to tell us in that process. The next point is deciding to write about a topic that you feel comfortable with, of course. So that's kind of what we were just chatting about, is choosing topics that are just, again, they're things that you're excited about, they're things that you're passionate about, or they're things that you have identified with or struggled with. Any of those things are going to be great for us to read. I always tell students that I love to laugh when I'm reading essays. I've read essays that have made me smile. They've been creative or interesting. So even if it's something that we've read before, it can still be unique coming from you, the individual. So that is something that's really great. I think there's one more bullet point here. So of course, leaving room for flexibility and creativity. Yeah, be flexible. And one of the great things about that is if you're preparing ahead and if you're thinking of different things throughout this process and coming back to it, you do leave more time for that flexibility and creativity. You leave time to give yourself the opportunity to change your mind or to revisit a topic with a fresh set of eyes. So leaving room for that is something that is really important as well. So I think that's all on the preparing to write. As far as writing the essay goes, you'll notice that as we go through some of these different bullet points, it's going to start to sound repetitive again, but I just want to make sure it's known that we're evaluating your writing skills. We are evaluating your ability to come in, answer a question, and do it well. So writing the essay, as you leave here today, you're going to feel like I maybe said the same thing a few times over, and I definitely did. It is because we really want you to take that point home and know that the essay is something that we are going to be a little bit critical of, and as far as your writing goes, and we want to make sure that you're going to be able to do that and transition that at the college level, as we've already shared. So writing the essay itself, after you've gotten your ideas together and chosen your prompts and chosen your topics, make sure that you're writing something where you can be specific, as we talked about on the previous slide, where you can be yourself. Writing multiple drafts is extremely important. One thing that I will say is that not only is it important for you to have multiple ideas, have that opportunity to be flexible and creative as you go back and new ideas pop up, giving yourself time is extremely important, but review your draft, read it out loud, say it out loud, see how it sounds when you say it. My recommendation to you all is review, and then have your friends review it, have a parent review it, a teacher, your counselor, whoever you can have eyes on it. I would encourage you to have at least 3 sets of eyes on this essay. That way you are getting multiple points of view, multiple opportunities to catch mistakes, catch errors. Reading it aloud, as we've already shared, is something that's super important, that you want to make sure that you have knocked out any capitalization errors. We don't want to see any basic mistakes, is something that you really, really want to try to avoid. So any capitalization of the letter I, using the right spelling, of words, the right past tense, present tense, making sure that you're keeping consistent with that, the right punctuation, apostrophes, any of those things that you've been practicing forever, you've been doing forever. It can be easy to miss. Make sure that you are catching those errors as you read it aloud and review it multiple times. Asking for help is something that is super important as well. We encourage all of our students to reach out, ask for people to review it with you, ask for people with the help with ideas, as we've already shared. You would be surprised what people are willing to share with you about what they know of you, and how that can really help you encourage ideas for yourself and how you see yourself, and connecting those 2 dots is really great. So asking for help is really important. Reading it aloud, those are things that you're going to want to do throughout this process. And of course, using proper grammar, spelling, sentence structure, all of those things are going to be extremely key for us, because as we've already shared, the writing skills are going to be so huge, and how you communicate in your writing, in your papers, in your emails, and all of the things that you do moving forward, people are going to want to see strong writing skills. So we encourage you to do that. One general piece of advice that I'll mention here is that if you are planning on submitting submitting an application to multiple schools and multiple schools are going to review your essay, keep in mind, especially on things like Common App, if you choose to list a specific school and say, I am so passionate about XYZ, I would like to go here, that essay is going to circulate to all the schools that you submit it to. So keep that in mind if you are thinking of submitting multiple applications and mentioning one specific school, that others will read that as well. That's just a general piece of advice that I like to share, so that you can keep in mind moving forward as you write that essay as well. So what I want to do next is take some time to talk a little bit more about specific examples. So the next slide, we're actually going to do kind of a opportunity to see it one-on-one. I know I'm a super visual person, so I will say that with these examples, you have the opportunity to kind of read them as I'm talking through it, but I want to read them aloud. We've got two examples here. One that is maybe a little bit more of a better example for what we're looking for. So these are real applications to what we've been chatting about. And if you have any specific questions on any of these, of course, we can always answer those at the chat. I know we're leaving some time to answer questions at the end. So we'll go through these, give you some examples so that you can really see it being applied here. So I'll go ahead and read the first one. I'm sure most of you have gotten started, and I'll kind of chat through some of the first initial things that I see here. So the first one is, I like to play soccer a lot. I'm a good student, always ready for anything that my teachers give me. I will like to play soccer for college and make something out of it. I'll be willing to study at this university and play the sport I live. I'm a senior at Wakefield High School and I live to play soccer, but the thing I think about the most is school. I'm always staying on track and try my best not to fall behind. And when I have time, I'll go to practice the sport that I love the most, which is soccer. Like I said, I don't like to fall behind because school means so much to me, and I will always want to keep my head above everyone else so I won't have any trouble studying in college and playing in college. That is my main goal right now. And I'm going to graduate and pass everything that I need to get this over with and move on to a bigger level. So I'll make the best of myself. Like I said, I'll be the best of the best on the field and off the field. It's going to take some work, but I'm willing to take the opportunity. So quick pause. As you can see, there's a couple of things, even I had a hard time reading it incorrectly because my instinct was to read the sentence how I know it wanted to be read. So let's talk a little bit more about what some of the challenges were in this first essay and why we've talked so much about review and asking for help and having the opportunity to be specific and all of those things that we've shared. So we'll start with some of the glaring issues. I would say that there has been a lot of spelling errors. So some words, we just didn't quite get them right. Maybe we were in a rush. We maybe just tried to get it done as quickly as possible. So I would say you've seen some of those words behind. I think another great example would be the past and present tense. Making sure that we're using consistent tenses throughout, capitalization. So we see that the high school hasn't been capitalized, just incorrect words all throughout. The run-on sentences too. I know this is one that can be a little bit tricky. So when we say to be specific and add fluff, make sure that it does not equate to a run-on sentence. Those two things are not the same. You can still have descriptive language, but it still be a concise sentence that's not repetitive or not running on into one massive sentence. So make sure that your punctuation is strong here. You'll see some missing punctuation throughout here, missing apostrophes, things that don't need to be capitalized, which is like graduate, but we didn't capitalize the high school. So there are several examples that we could look here. And the things that as we review these applications and we review these essays is, of course, making sure, is this an essay that if with a few tweaks and with a few years of experience, is this something that is going to be strengthened at the college level? And, when you have really, really basic errors that are sprinkled throughout the essay, it does raise some levels of concern. And As we've already shared at the beginning of this, we're reviewing for general admission as well as scholarship information. So having those basic errors is not something that is going to benefit your application review moving forward. So this is a good example of things that you can easily cut out just by asking for help or reviewing it or giving yourself enough time. As far as the topic itself, it's awesome if you love soccer and that's something that you're passionate about, but making sure that maybe answering the prompt, it could have been something like, what's an area that you struggled in and how did you overcome? This is an example that might not really answer the question. It doesn't really tell me anything about the student. It just talks about the love of soccer. All I really know at the end of this essay is that they love soccer and that they do want to do well in college. And both of those things are great, but how could we dive a little deeper? What's a specific game or a time in a tournament that you really felt so connected to the sport or your teammates? Why is that something that you'd like to continue on a higher level? So those are the things that we'd want to think about moving forward with this essay. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one, see if we can see what might be a little bit better in this next one. So the second example, I'll go ahead and read that as well. So I love Lindy Hop. Lindy Hop is a form of swing dancing that rose to popularity in the late 1920s and is still in practice around the world today. I began taking swing classes in August of 2015. Lindy Hop experience has been a valuable part of my high school journey. Weekly classes and social dances have provided me with an outlet for stress relief, exercise, promoted my creativity and confidence. Lindy Hop is unique and it's a strong partner connection between the lead and the follow, complemented by each dancer, creative styling and improvisation. It took me a while to reach the point of comfortably incorporating spontaneity into my dancing because I was so focused on trying to follow the lead. The last thing I wanted to do was be the one who messed up. This perfectionist mentality limited my progress. After abundance of encouragement from instructors and dance partners, I began experimenting with stylistic variations of basic steps during the social dance. That is when it clicked. I was so excited. I was beginning to understand what the instructors meant when they said to feel the music. It was hard to overcome the fear of embarrassment in order to put my creative self out there on the dance floor, but it happened. I'm so passionate about Lindy Hop because it stretches me and gives me joy. The Lindy Hop community is inclusive, friendly, and encouraging, and I plan to continue swing dancing for as long as I can. So the first thing I'll say is that prior to reading this example, I had never heard of this. I'm not super familiar with swing dance, but with that being said, this has taught me something totally new. So even though this student chose to write about something that they're passionate about, it still ended up coming across as something unique. So you would be surprised what things you might teach us in this process. But so let's talk a little bit more about why this example might be a little bit more of what we are looking for as far as answering a prompt, review, and having good language. One thing that I'll say is that to keep in mind as you write these essays and how it gets formatted when you maybe copy it over from Word to the Common Application. Some of those errors I think were actually just a formatting issue. So something to keep in mind to even double check once you put it in either Common Application or whatever school's application that you're using. So in that formatting, I think those question marks could be a little confusing. That actually could just be a transition issue. So keep in mind that, you review it while you've got it written and then you review it again once you put it into the application that you're using. But overall, we see that this is a big improvement from the first essay. There is a beginning and a middle and an end to each thought, so that they started swing dance, that they really loved it. Their challenge was that they just couldn't quite get into the music and they were having a hard time, being so focused on getting it right that maybe they weren't enjoying it as much and it wasn't quite as fun as it could have been. And then the end is where they finally connected that and were willing to overcome that fear of embarrassment. So you can see a very clear beginning, middle, and end to this essay, which is really important. You can see that there has been strong punctuation, capitalization is correct. As you move throughout, the punctuation is strong. There's not a lot of run-on sentences, but this is a great example of using fluff and using descriptive words and being creative can be done in a way that is not repetitive and is not taking away from the actual answering of the prompt. I mean, they use some great descriptive words, spontaneity, perfectionism, all of those things can be really helpful for writing a good essay. But again, it's not getting into being repetitive or taking away from the topic. So this is a really strong example of just getting beginning, middle, end, writing with good form. This example is going to be something that is going to be a little bit stronger than that first essay where we saw a lot of capitalization errors. You could tell that this person didn't really review. This person, the second example, is clear that they thought about what topic they wanted to write about. It was authentic to who they were and who they are and what they're passionate about. And they were still able to answer the prompt. And, this was something that sure, maybe was it this person's biggest challenge of their life? Maybe not, but it's something that they still overcame and were still able to share and learn to experience joy from. So that's a really great example of being able to answer the prompt, give us a lot of detail, taught me something new that I hadn't been familiar with, and then is still clearly been reviewed and is showing stronger writing skills. So that is a good example between those first two. So hopefully that gave you a really good perspective on giving you a visual on some of the things that we've been chatting about throughout this presentation. So I believe that is all I have in terms of slides. I wanted to make sure to leave some time for questions. I know that we've got some great moderators to answer those questions and pass those along to me. So I'm really excited to answer any questions that you have about the presentation.
All right. So thank you so much, first of all, Ms. Huck. This was amazing. And
Awesome.
as counselors as well, we all have learned something and many things. So just really appreciate that. And hopefully everybody else, and I know you did, got some great and valuable information, but we do want to open it up for questions. And so you can certainly put any questions that you have in the chat, and either any of our career counselors here this morning can answer them, as well as Ms. Huck. So please, if you have questions, there's no bad question. We can all learn from it. So please, if you have any, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. So we'll just give it a minute for you to kind of get any ideas that you have out there or put any questions in the chat.
And I'll just add that we have recorded this session and we'll be sharing that out later. There's so many bits that I will probably go back and just reflect. And I love seeing those examples too, especially in that second example where there's really just a good amount of reflection, I think, that the student engaged in, not just telling a story, but kind of reflecting on their experience, which was great. So far, no questions. I think, Kate, you did such a great job.
I know. That means I really did my job well today.
We do have one question. One just came up. Do you have any advice for how to choose a prompt?
Sure. I mean, as we've shared, I think so much of what students are worried about is that it's not going to be, it's not going to be big enough, or it's not going to be something totally unique. And I think that that's a lot of the fears that we see, is that students feel like they don't have this completely original experience, that they can talk about. And you don't have to be fearful of that. As we talked about earlier in the presentation, when choosing a prompt, choosing something that is reflective of you and your experience and what you've had. You don't have to have something totally original. It might be something that we've read before, but no matter what, it's still going to be personal and unique to you. It's still going to be a unique perspective coming from you, the individual. And that's where you can get creative and put your own spin on it, even if it is writing about a sport that, maybe hundreds of other people have played. So it doesn't have to be anything that's overwhelmingly unique. It's whatever you would like it to be. And I can kind of see another question that popped up, which actually kind of connects really well with this one, is that there are different essay topics. And so as you go through the application, you'll see, I always like to use Common App because I know that that's one that a lot of schools are on, but there are different essay topics to choose from that they list off for you that you get to pick from. And you get to look through that list and decide which one is going to give you the best opportunity to showcase yourself, whether that be through a challenge you overcame, or as Jennifer mentioned, just being reflective on something that you've enjoyed and what you learned from that and why you maybe would want to continue that at the next level. So choosing a prompt is giving yourself time to think about it and maybe revisit, giving yourself time to maybe ask the others in your life, what is something that I've done that's impacted you, or where do you see my role in this community? It's great to get perspective from other people that you can then take back and say, oh my gosh, I'm so passionate about that already. It's great that others saw me in that role. How can I talk more about that on a reflective level as an opportunity that I had or something that I overcame? So choosing a prompt, there's so many great ways that you can do it. Again, I like to laugh. I love when things are creative. I read a really great essay that a student talked about where they got their nickname from. And, something as small as that, like, that's who you are. That's how people address you. That's how you respond in the world and how people know you. So something even as little as my childhood nickname could be something that you talk about. So really, there's tons of great essay topics out there. It's up to you to decide what's going to be the best for you. But this awesome panelist of women that are up here and your teachers and your family members, they are all going to be resources for you as you move through that process.
Thanks, Kate. Can I actually ask a question? Because the question about the different essay topics made me think. You mentioned the Common App essay. That's one that a lot of students are going to have to write, but then there's a possibility students might have another essay or a supplemental essay that's very specific to a college that might be something like why us or why this college within a larger university. Do you have any advice or do's and don'ts for that very specific kind of why us essay?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because that was something that we'd mentioned previously. So maybe the essay isn't the place where you share that XYZ is your dream school, just because it is going to go off to other places. That's your decision, and depending on how you're doing your applications, it's just something to think about because sometimes students actually don't know that. So something to think about. So that's why the supplemental essay that Jennifer's mentioned is so important, is that a lot of schools do have the opportunity to share why you're interested. So it doesn't have to be as long as your essay, so don't get overwhelmed thinking that it needs to be another long additional essay to pre-plan and pre-write. But it's important that as you go throughout this process and you look at schools and you learn their review process, that you really identify why you would like to go there and why that feels like it would be a good fit. And hopefully you're doing that already as you go and you visit these schools. So, maybe take notes at your next college visit, maybe like do some bullet points on why you really connected or what you really liked so that it can jog your memory later. So when you get to one of those supplemental essays, you can be really honest about the things that you loved, and you can reference, I visited your campus on this day, or I came to this event and it was so exciting and I connected with your tour guides, or I met a faculty member. Being specific in that way, specific is always going to be wonderful. And of course, just being honest that why I'm excited about it, what program I'm excited about, just having specific examples, or even if you just browse the website and do a virtual tour, whatever your ability is at the time, just finding the reasons why you truly like that school and putting that down. But don't worry about word count or anything. It's just supplemental. It's something that you could do. We actually have it on our application, so you can say why you're excited and why you think it would be a good fit. So just use examples, kind of like you would if you were doing a job interview or a resume. You want to have examples of the things that you've done. So it's kind of the same thing. You'd want to have examples for why you like the school and why you think you would be a good fit for it. Great question.
It looks like another one came through. Can you give advice about the do's and do nots for a personal statement?
Sure. So personal statements, that's a good question. I know that myself, just speaking from my own experience, I did a personal statement for a graduate program, but at the institutions where I worked, I didn't have a personal statement required as part of the review process. So I'm not really sure I could dive too deep here, since my experience as an admission officer hasn't really given me a lot of personal statements, but it is something that you can do in your essay if you would like to start your essay a certain way. I might pass it over to your career counselors and see if they have any other specific information, since I typically am looking at the essay from just the prompts that are listed on there. So I don't want to give too much advice on do's and don'ts for that. So I might pass that over to my other team members up here. But as far as the essay goes, the whole thing is going to be really kind of a personal statement in its own way of just choosing a prompt and saying, you know, here are the examples of what I've done and what my opportunities were and how I overcame them. It can also kind of be a summary. One thing I will say is that the rest of your application tends to be a little bit more of a summary of you. So when you're filling out your involvements, that's kind of listing out, that's kind of your personal, here's what's listed out for me and what I've been involved in. As you're going throughout your biographical information, all of that gets included. So that's why the essay is a little bit different, because it's not just a summary of the things that you've done. It is going to give you a little bit more of a creative bandwidth to expand on those topics. But I'm going to pass it over to your counselors to see if they have anything they'd like to add to that.
I think Ms. Melton and I think are both have comments. I would say my one advice I would do that I give students is to make sure that you share what you're comfortable with, because a lot of times in personal statements, especially if it's about an event or something that has occurred, you don't necessarily need to overshare, especially if it's not something that you are particularly comfortable with. Don't feel like you have to have some sort of edge, like if I share this event that has happened to me, but I'm still not, I'm not okay with it. I would not recommend that, certainly. So share what you're comfortable with. Absolutely. And also I always advise students, and Ms. Huck, you can, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to something like something that occurred, I always advise them to try to find a positive spin on it. So not so much kind of lamenting on the actual event, but kind of what did I learn from it? How did I overcome it? That would be my advice.
Yeah, and maybe I took personal statement a little too literally there, but I will say that's excellent advice. With that being said, of course, if it's a huge part of your story and you are ready to share, as Jennifer already shared, share that. That is something that students will do in their essay. But I will reiterate that sometimes it can be really challenging on the other end if there isn't a spin on, here's what's happened afterwards, here's the follow-up to that, here's how my life has continued in this way. So I would definitely reiterate that, and just know at the end of this, no matter what you choose to write, there's going to be a person on the other end reading this. It's not going to be just a computer going through it. So I think that is something that can be a really good thing to remind yourself, is that there are people, I'm one of those people that are going to be on the other side reading this. So think about that as you go through. And I know that might sound like simple advice, but think about the fact that there are people on the other side of these essays reviewing it and learning about you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone who's on the call, Kate, right here, this is the face who's going to be sitting probably in winter, bundled up, reading all of your essays, essay after essay. But I know, especially here at Hanover, I think some of our teachers do some great work in the classroom around essay writing. And I know sometimes they call it the personal statement. And essentially, I think this idea of the personal statement works really well for the Common App. Because essentially it's really an open-ended kind of essay. Hey, here is your chance to talk to Kate kind of one-on-one in written form about who you are and what matters to you. And so I think one of the things that Mrs. Crowder shared, about oversharing, make sure it's something that you're comfortable to write about. I think in terms of some of the supplementary questions this year, we're seeing some changes due to a recent Supreme Court ruling. And so some of those questions might ask students if they want to write about something. So again, make sure it's something that you're comfortable writing about. And that reflection piece, I mean, I think, Kate, that example that you shared was great. I also love how you kind of talked a little bit about essentially emotion. That the reader is sitting there reading essay after essay after essay. And if your essay isn't authentic to just your voice and who you are, they're not expecting a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old. And if you're funny, then be funny. If you're sentimental, be sentimental. Just kind of being your authentic self. And then the other don'ts, Kate, I think you addressed them great, which is have someone review, make sure there aren't typos, just good basic editing. I think those would be kind of the key do's and don'ts. I think we could go into like a lot of specifics that would just kind of overwhelm the student, which really isn't necessary, but be yourself. And if you have trouble, obviously teachers and counselors are here to help students along the way, as are family members and friends.
Sure. And I will say one of the things too is why it's kind of hard to just book in some of this is that the do's and don'ts for each of you might look totally different. Some of you might not struggle with the same thing that your desk neighbor is going to struggle with. So for you, if I say, make sure you review your paper over and over again, that might not even be something you were considering. You might have thought, I'm going to review it until the paper is like nearly tattered. So, some of your do's and don'ts might look a little bit different. And that's why pulling on your resources that know you on a personal level, pulling on your counselors and your teachers who are more familiar with your work and your previous experience. Don't be afraid to do that, because they're going to be the ones that, if you say what's a do and don't for my paper, they're going to be able to know what your typical do's and don'ts have been or what your challenges have been. So I would say pull on your resources. They want to help you, especially setting things up like this and just meeting with you on a one-to-one level. They definitely want to help you through this process. So reach out to them.
That looks like that was the last question. Nothing else came through while we were talking. So right now, students, parents, if you have another question, go ahead and we'll give you about 30 seconds to put it in the chat before we wrap everything up. One of my favorite things you said in the do's and the don'ts, and that I hope a lot of students heard, is the essay is not a rewrite of all of the things you've done. And so I've seen that a lot. And if you're going to talk about things that you've done, maybe pick a couple and have a story to go with them, not just a relisting of I've participated in this and I've done this and I've volunteered here, because in the Common App, you have opportunities to say that. So that really struck home to me when you said that. So I hope everybody heard that in terms of the don'ts in this part of the personal statement. Any other questions out there? Well, if not, then we are going to wrap up this webinar today, and we are so pleased that you were able to join us today and to help our students and families navigate what can sometimes be a very stressful process in the application process. So everyone, this will be shared. You will have time to review it, especially if you haven't started your topic and in a month you're like, what did she say? You can rewatch this video, and please pass it along to your other friends and make sure that they know that this is available to them as well. So thank you very much for joining us today, Kate, and hopefully you will see some of our students very, very soon at the expo, and they will come by and say hello.
Thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate.
Thank
and remember,
you.
everyone, to join us back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. For the financial aid scholarships and money saving tips session with GRASP. Patty Wood from our Atlee High School, our GRASP advisor, will be here to share lots of great information. Your career counselors here on the call today will share lots of good information about scholarships. And again, I did want to say, you've already heard the video from today is going to be sent out this afternoon, but also note that we're going to be sending out a video resource, another one, from an HR generalist in this area that's going to be talking about tips for getting a job. So it's a really good video. So check that out. And we look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.